The unwanted invitation. Captain Sarah Chen stared at the holographic message floating above her desk, reading it for the 5th time in 10 minutes. The translation software had to be malfunctioning. There was simply no way the message could be saying what she thought it was saying. Commander Torres, she called to her first officer, who was reviewing patrol reports at the adjacent workstation. Could you take a look at this transmission? I think our translation matrix might be having issues. Commander Miguel Torres glanced up from his datapad, his weathered face showing the kind of patient expression he reserved for technical problems and rookie pilots. He walked over and studied the hologram, his eyebrows climbing higher with each line he read. Well, Captain, he said slowly, either our translation software has developed a sense of humor, or we've just been invited to something called the Apex Deathworld Council. He paused, scratching his gray beard. Apparently, they want us to attend their annual gathering at a place called the Citadel of Ultimate Survival. Sarah leaned back in her chair, which creaked in protest. The UES Resilience was a good ship, but she was getting old, and everything on board seemed to creak, groan, or spark at least once per shift. Apex Deathworld Council, she repeated. That sounds either very important or very dangerous. Probably both, Torres replied. According to this, Earth has been classified as a Category 9 Deathworld, which apparently qualifies us for membership in their exclusive club. He continued reading. The invitation mentions something about proving our worthiness through trials of survival and adaptation. Sarah stood up and walked to the viewport, gazing out at the star field beyond. They were currently on patrol in the outer sectors, checking on the mining colonies and trade routes that kept human civilization running. It was routine work, the kind that kept the galaxy spinning without anyone really noticing. The idea that someone out there thought humanity deserved a place among the galaxy's most dangerous species was both flattering and terrifying. What do we know about Deathworld species? She asked. Torres consulted his datapad, scrolling through the Galactic database. Not much in the official records, but there are rumors. Species that evolved on worlds so hostile that just surviving to spaceflight is considered a miracle. They're supposed to be incredibly tough, highly advanced, and not particularly interested in playing nice with others. And they want us to join their club, Sarah mused. The question is, why now? Humanity has been in space for less than 2 centuries. Most of these species have probably been starfaring for millennia. Before Torres could answer, the ship's communication system chirped with an incoming priority message. Sarah returned to her desk and activated the display, revealing the stern face of Admiral Rebecca Stone, commander of the Human Colonial Defense Force. Captain Chen, the Admiral began without preamble, I trust you've received the invitation from the Deathworld Council. Sarah nodded, and the Admiral continued. This is a significant opportunity for humanity. These species control some of the most resource-rich and strategically important regions of the galaxy. Their formal recognition could change our status from a minor emerging species to a major galactic power. Understood, Admiral, Sarah replied. What are our orders? You're to proceed immediately to the coordinates provided in the invitation. The Council has granted us safe passage through their territory, but only for one ship. The Resilience was chosen because of your crew's reputation for handling difficult situations. The Admiral's expression softened slightly. Sarah, I won't lie to you. We don't know what you're walking into. These species have a reputation for being direct in their approach to problem solving. But if anyone can represent humanity well in this situation, it's you and your crew. After the transmission ended, Sarah called a senior staff meeting. Within minutes, her department heads had assembled in the ship's small conference room. Besides Torres, there was Chief Engineer Lisa Park, a woman who could make broken equipment work through sheer force of will. Dr. James Wright, their medical officer who had seen more alien biology than most xenobiologists, and Lieutenant Alex Rivera, their communications specialist who had a gift for languages and an even better gift for reading between the lines. All right, people, Sarah began, We've been invited to join the galaxy's most exclusive and potentially dangerous club. I want to know everything we can learn about the Deathworld Council before we arrive." Dr. Wright was the first to speak. "I've been researching the medical implications of Deathworld evolution. Species that survive on extremely hostile planets tend to develop remarkable adaptability, enhanced healing factors, and resistance to environmental extremes. Some can survive in hard vacuum for limited periods. Others can regenerate lost limbs." "That's encouraging," Torres muttered. "What about their technology?" Chief Park leaned forward. "I've been analyzing the energy signatures from their transmission. The power levels involved are off the charts. Whatever they're using for communication makes our best equipment look like tin cans connected with string." Lieutenant Rivera had been quietly studying his datapad throughout the meeting. "Captain," he said, "I've been trying to understand the linguistic patterns in their invitation. There's something interesting here. The translation keeps using phrases like proving worthiness and trials of adaptation, but there's a subtle undertone that suggests they're not just testing us for membership." "What do you mean?" Sarah asked. "I think they're genuinely curious about us. The phrasing suggests they've been watching humanity for some time, and we've done something that impressed them. They want to see how we handle ourselves in person." Sarah absorbed this information, then made her decision. "We leave within the hour. Chief Park, I want every system running at peak efficiency. Dr. Wright, prepare for the possibility that we might encounter environmental hazards we've never seen before. Lieutenant Rivera, study everything you can about Council communication protocols. Torres, plot our course and prepare the crew for an extended journey into unknown space." The journey to the Citadel of Ultimate Survival took them through a region of space that seemed designed to discourage visitors. The navigation charts showed areas marked with warnings like gravitational anomalies, extreme caution, and temporal instabilities. Avoid at all costs. The route they were given threaded between these hazards like a path through a minefield. "Captain," Torres called from the navigation station, "we're approaching something called the Void Maze. According to the Council's instructions, this is the primary test of worthiness for reaching their station." Through the viewport, Sarah could see why it was called a maze. Space itself seemed to twist and fold, creating passages that appeared to lead in impossible directions. Energy fields crackled between floating debris that looked like the remains of ships that hadn't made it through. "Chief Park," Sarah called to the engineering station, "what are your sensors telling you?" "It's like nothing I've ever seen," Park replied, her voice tight with concentration. "The gravitational fields are constantly shifting. There are pockets of space where time moves differently, and some of those energy discharges could punch through our hull like it was paper." Sarah studied the maze for a long moment, then smiled. "You know what this reminds me of? Remember the asteroid field near Proxima Colony? The one where we had to rescue those miners?" Torres caught on immediately. "The one where we couldn't use conventional navigation because the asteroids were moving too fast and unpredictably." "Exactly. We solved that by not trying to predict the pattern. Instead, we reacted to changes as they happened." Sarah turned to her crew. "Everyone, forget about trying to map this maze or find the optimal path. We're going to navigate by instinct and adaptation." What followed was the most intense hour of flying any of them had experienced. The Resilience twisted and turned through passages that seemed to change the moment they entered them. When gravitational fields tried to crush the ship, Park rerouted power to structural integrity. When time distortions threatened to trap them in temporal loops, Rivera used communication bursts to track their position. When energy discharges blocked their path, Dr. Wright's knowledge of exotic matter helped them find safe passage through seemingly impossible routes. Finally, they emerged from the maze to find themselves facing a structure that defied easy description. The Citadel of Ultimate Survival looked like someone had taken the architectural traditions of a dozen different species and combined them into something that was both beautiful and intimidating. Crystalline spires rose from metallic foundations, while organic curves flowed around geometric patterns that seemed to exist in more than 3 dimensions. "Incoming transmission," Rivera announced. Multiple sources, different languages, but they're all saying the same thing. "Welcome, survivors." The docking bay they were directed to was enormous, easily capable of holding ships 10 times the size of the Resilience. What caught Sarah's attention, however, was the variety of vessels already docked there. Some looked like they had been grown rather than built, with organic curves and surfaces that seemed to pulse with life. Others appeared to be constructed from crystallized energy, their hulls shimmering with patterns of light. A few looked like they had been carved from single pieces of some incredibly dense metal, their surfaces scarred by impacts that would have destroyed lesser materials. "Captain," Dr. Wright said quietly, "those ships represent some serious evolutionary adaptation. Look at the hull composition variations. These species have developed technology specifically suited to their home environments." As they disembarked, Sarah and her crew were greeted by what could only be described as a reception committee. The beings waiting for them represented a stunning variety of forms and sizes. There was a creature that looked like it was made of living stone, standing nearly 3 meters tall with crystal formations growing from its shoulders. Beside it, a being that appeared to be composed of controlled plasma floated in a containment field that sparkled with its own internal lightning. A third representative looked almost human, except for the fact that its skin had a metallic sheen and its eyes glowed with an inner light. The stone creature spoke first, its voice rumbling like an avalanche. "I am Granite Heart Thoric, representative of the Silicon Collective. We have watched your species with interest, humans of Earth." The plasma being's voice came from speakers integrated into its containment field. "I am Storm Dancer Zell of the Ionic Reach. Your journey through the Void Maze was creative." The metallic humanoid stepped forward. "And I am Forge Master Crix of the Metal Worlds. We are curious to see how a young species approaches our trials." Sarah straightened, drawing on years of diplomatic training. "I am Captain Sarah Chen of the United Earth Ship Resilience. We are honored by your invitation and grateful for the opportunity to prove our worthiness." Thoric's crystalline features shifted in what might have been amusement. "Prove your worthiness. Human Chen, you have already begun to prove something far more interesting." "Which is?" Torres asked. Storm Dancer Zell's plasma form pulsed brighter. "That survival is not always about strength or advanced technology. Sometimes it is about adaptation and creativity. Your navigation of the Void Maze was unlike anything we have seen." Forge Master Crix nodded. "Most species attempt to overcome the maze through superior firepower or technological sophistication. You succeeded by embracing its chaos and finding harmony within it." Dr. Wright stepped forward. "If I may ask, what exactly are these trials we're supposed to face?" "The trials," Thoric rumbled, "are designed to test the fundamental survival characteristics that define a Deathworld species: endurance, adaptability, cooperation, and innovation." However, Storm Dancer Zell added, "It has been many cycles since we have tested a species that interests us as much as humanity does." Sarah felt a mixture of pride and concern. "What makes us so interesting?" Forge Master Crix's metallic features arranged themselves into what might have been a smile. "You will understand soon enough. Come, the council awaits, and the trials will begin at the next cycle." As they were led deeper into the Citadel, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into something far more complex than a simple membership test. The way the council representatives spoke suggested that humanity's arrival had implications beyond what any of them had imagined. The corridors of the Citadel were as diverse as its exterior, with sections that seemed designed for different atmospheric requirements and gravitational preferences. They passed through areas where the ceiling curved overhead like a natural cave, others where the walls seemed to be made of flowing water held in place by invisible forces, and still others where the floor was transparent, offering views of the star field below. "Captain," Rivera whispered as they walked, "I'm picking up communication signals from all over the station. There are at least 50 different species represented here, And they're all talking about us. What are they saying? Sarah asked quietly. That's the interesting part. They're not just discussing our arrival. They're debating something called the succession protocol. I can't get a clear translation, but it seems to involve changes in council leadership. Before Sarah could respond, they arrived at a vast chamber that could only be the council meeting hall. Tiered seating rose in concentric circles around a central platform, and every seat was occupied by a representative of a different Deathworld species. The diversity was overwhelming. Beings of crystal and flame, creatures that looked like they were made of liquid metal, entities that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. At the center of the platform stood a being that commanded immediate attention. Tall and graceful, with features that suggested both great age and tremendous wisdom, it wore robes that seemed to be woven from starlight itself. I am ancient wisdom Velix, the being announced, its voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber without the aid of any visible amplification system. I speak for the Council of Apex Deathworlds, and I welcome the representatives of humanity. Sarah stepped forward. We are honored by your welcome, ancient wisdom Velix. The honor, Velix replied, may ultimately be ours, but that remains to be determined through the trials that await you. Trials, chaos, and unexpected promotion. Ancient wisdom Velix gestured toward the assembled council members. The trials you will face have been used for millennia to test potential new members. They are designed to push you to your absolute limits and reveal the true nature of your species' survival characteristics. Sarah nodded, trying to project confidence she didn't entirely feel. We're ready to begin whenever the council deems appropriate. Excellent, Velix replied. The first trial is the Crimson Labyrinth, a test of individual survival skills and problem-solving ability. You will face this trial alone, Captain Chen, as the representative of your species. A section of the chamber floor began to descend, revealing a circular platform surrounded by walls that seemed to be made of crystallized blood. The labyrinth stretched out in all directions, its passages twisting and turning in patterns that hurt to look at directly. The objective is simple. Thoric rumbled from his position in the council seating. Reach the center of the labyrinth and activate the beacon you will find there. The maze will test not only your physical capabilities but your mental flexibility and creative problem-solving. Sarah studied the labyrinth entrance, noting the way the walls seemed to shift and move when she wasn't looking directly at them. Any rules I should know about? Only one. Storm Dancer Zell replied. The labyrinth learns from each attempt. The longer you take, the more difficult it becomes. Most species complete the trial through superior strength, speed, or technological advantage. We are curious to see what approach humanity will take. Sarah descended to the platform and stood at the labyrinth entrance. The walls were warm to the touch and seemed to pulse with a life of their own. She took a deep breath, then stepped inside. The first thing she noticed was that the passages were not quite wide enough for comfortable movement, clearly designed for beings larger or differently shaped than humans. The second thing she noticed was that the walls were covered with symbols that glowed faintly and seemed to move when she focused on them. Rather than immediately choosing a direction, Sarah sat down cross-legged in the entrance passage and closed her eyes. This earned surprised murmurs from the council members watching through viewing screens positioned throughout the chamber. What is the human doing? Forge Master Crix asked. She appears to be resting, Thoric observed, confusion evident in his rumbling voice. Sarah wasn't resting. She was listening. The labyrinth might be made of exotic materials and governed by alien technology, but it was still essentially a puzzle. And puzzles, she had learned long ago, often revealed their secrets to those who approached them with patience rather than brute force. After several minutes, she began to hear it. A subtle rhythm in the way the walls pulsed, a pattern in the way the symbols shifted and changed. The labyrinth wasn't just learning from her. It was trying to communicate. Standing up, Sarah placed her hand on the nearest wall and began to tap out a simple rhythm, mimicking the pulse she had detected. The wall's glow brightened, and the symbols began to move more rapidly. "Fascinating," Dr. Wright observed from the council chamber. "She's treating the labyrinth like a living entity rather than a mechanical obstacle." Sarah continued her rhythmic tapping, gradually increasing the complexity of the pattern. The labyrinth responded by opening new passages and closing others, creating a direct path toward the center. But more than that, the walls began to display images, scenes of other species attempting the trial, their various approaches to the challenge. She saw beings who had blasted through the walls with energy weapons, others who had climbed over the barriers using advanced technology, and still others who had solved the maze through pure computational analysis. But none of them had tried to communicate with it. Following the path the labyrinth had opened for her, Sarah made her way to the center in less than 15 minutes, apparently a new record. The beacon was a crystalline structure that pulsed with the same rhythm she had detected in the walls. When she touched it, the entire labyrinth lit up like a constellation, and the beacon's pulse synchronized perfectly with her heartbeat. "Trial completed," Ancient Wisdom Velix announced as Sarah returned to the council chamber. Time: 14 minutes, 37 seconds. Method: diplomatic communication with the testing system itself. The council members exchanged glances that Sarah was beginning to recognize as the universal expression, for that wasn't supposed to happen. The second trial, Velix continued, is the Cooperation Crucible. You and your crew will work with representatives from 3 other council species to solve a complex survival scenario. This time, the entire chamber reconfigured itself into what looked like a space station bridge surrounded by holographic displays showing various emergency situations. Sarah's crew was joined by Granite Heart Thoric, Storm Dancer Zell, and a new representative, a being that looked like a cross between a giant insect and a living computer. "I am HiveMind Nexus," the new representative announced through a combination of clicking sounds and digital tones. "I speak for the collective intelligence of the resonance worlds." The scenario they faced was brutal in its complexity. Multiple star systems were under attack by some kind of energy-consuming entities that devoured entire planets. The attacking force was too large for any single fleet to handle. Communication across the affected region was breaking down due to interference, and refugee populations needed evacuation from dozens of worlds simultaneously. Traditional approach, Thoric stated immediately, would be to coordinate massive military response. Silicon Collective can provide siege-resistant planetary defenses. Ionic Reach offers high-speed strike capabilities. Storm Dancer Zell added, "We can hit the entities before they fully establish themselves in each system." HiveMind Nexus can provide computational analysis for optimal resource allocation. Nexus clicked and buzzed. Efficiency will be maximized through distributed processing. Sarah listened to their suggestions, then studied the holographic displays more carefully. Something about the scenario bothered her. The attacks seemed almost random, but there was a pattern hidden in the chaos. "Wait," she said. "Look at the timing of the attacks. They're not random. The entities are driving the refugee populations toward specific systems." Commander Torres caught on immediately. "It's a herding tactic. They're forcing populations to concentrate in areas where they can be more easily consumed." Chief Park was already running calculations on her datapad. "If we reinforce the systems they want us to defend, we're playing into their strategy. But if we evacuate everyone to completely different locations, we break their pattern," Dr. Wright finished. "But that would require coordinating the evacuation of billions of people across multiple star systems without using the compromised communication networks." Lieutenant Rivera looked up from his analysis station. "Actually, we might be able to do that. Look at the interference patterns affecting communications. They're not random either. The entities are generating specific frequency disruptions." Sarah felt that familiar spark of inspiration that meant either breakthrough or disaster. What if we don't fight the interference? What if we use it? The alien representatives looked confused, but Sarah's crew was already following her reasoning. The interference patterns create their own communication network, Torres realized. If we can modulate our signals to match the disruption frequencies, we can send messages through the interference itself, Rivera finished excitedly. What followed was the most complex coordination effort any of them had ever attempted. Using the enemy's own interference as a communication medium, they managed to secretly coordinate the evacuation of entire populations to systems the entities weren't expecting them to defend. Meanwhile, the military forces were repositioned not to fight the entities directly, but to create massive energy reflectors that turned the creatures' own planet-consuming abilities back on themselves. The trial ended with the complete defeat of the attacking entities and the successful evacuation of over 90% of the threatened populations. The time limit was 30 minutes. They completed it in 22. Remarkable, Ancient Wisdom Valix said as the holographic scenario faded. Once again, humanity has chosen an approach that no previous species has attempted. You turned the enemy's strength into their weakness and used their own tactics against them. Sarah was about to respond when alarm signals began sounding throughout the Citadel. The lights shifted to emergency red, and Valix's expression became grim. "This is not part of the trials," the ancient being announced. "We are under actual attack." Through the chamber's transparent walls, Sarah could see explosions of light in the space around the Citadel. Ships that looked like twisted versions of the Council vessels were firing some kind of energy weapons that seemed to eat away at their targets rather than simply equals, destroying them. "The Devourers," Thoric rumbled, fear evident in his voice for the first time. "We thought they had been contained in the outer void." "What are Devourers?" Dr. Wright asked. "Entities that consume not just matter and energy, but the very concepts of existence," Storm Dancer Zell explained, its plasma form flickering with agitation. "They are drawn to concentrations of life force and advanced technology. Like a gathering of 50 Deathworld species in one location," Sarah realized. Forge Master Crix's metallic features twisted into an expression of despair. "The Citadel's defenses are strong, but they were not designed to repel a full-scale Devourer assault. We have perhaps 1 hour before they break through our shields." Sarah looked around the chamber at the assembled council members. These were representatives of the galaxy's most dangerous and survivable species, and they looked genuinely terrified. That meant this situation was beyond anything they had faced before. "Ancient Wisdom Valix," she said, "what would happen if the Citadel fell?" "The Devourers would consume not just our lives, but our accumulated knowledge, our cultural achievements, and our genetic diversity. The loss would set back galactic civilization by millennia." Sarah made a decision that would have seemed insane an hour ago, but now felt completely natural. "Then we don't let that happen. All council members, this is Captain Sarah Chen of the United Earth Ship Resilience. I'm assuming emergency command of the Citadel's defense." The chamber fell silent. In the background, the sounds of the attack continued, but every eye was focused on Sarah. "You cannot." Hive Mind Nexus buzzed and clicked frantically. "Emergency protocols require unanimous council approval for command transfer. Such approval has never been given to a non-member species." "Then we'd better make this quick," Sarah replied. "All in favor of temporary emergency command authorization for humanity. Signify however your species indicates agreement." For a moment, nothing happened. Then Granite Heart Thoric raised one massive stone arm. "The Silicon Collective approves." Storm Dancer Zell's plasma form pulsed brighter. "The Ionic Reach approves." One by one, representatives from across the galaxy voiced their approval. Even Hive Mind Nexus eventually joined the unanimous vote. Ancient Wisdom Velix nodded gravely. "By unanimous consent of the assembled council, emergency command is transferred to Captain Sarah Chen of Humanity. May wisdom guide your decisions." Sarah felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders, but also the familiar rush of adrenaline that came with impossible challenges. "Right. First priority. I need to understand our defensive capabilities and the nature of the attacking force." Chief Park was already interfacing with the Citadel's engineering systems. "Captain, The power generation here is incredible, but it's all being channeled into passive shields. The weapon systems are minimal. Apparently the Council relies on individual ship defenses rather than station-based armaments. That makes sense for a diplomatic facility, Torres observed. But it leaves us vulnerable to exactly this kind of concentrated assault. Dr. Wright was studying the sensor readings of the attacking ships. Captain, these devourers aren't just consuming matter. They're absorbing energy patterns, technological configurations, even information itself. Traditional weapons might actually make them stronger. Sarah studied the tactical displays, watching the patterns of the attack. The devourers were methodically working their way through the Citadel's defenses, learning from each encounter and adapting their approach accordingly. Lieutenant Rivera, she called, can you analyze their communication patterns? If they're absorbing information, they must be processing and sharing it somehow. Rivera was already deep in his analysis. Captain, they're using a distributed intelligence network. Each ship is learning from the other's experiences in real time. But there's something strange about the communication protocol they're using. What kind of strange? It's almost like they're using a simplified version of the same frequency patterns we used in the Cooperation Crucible trial. Like they learned it from watching our performance. Sarah felt a chill of realization. They're not just attacking randomly. They've been studying us. All of us. They know our capabilities, our tactics, our technologies. Which means, Commander Torres said grimly, that everything we know how to do, they know how to counter. The situation was deteriorating rapidly. The Citadel's shields were down to 60% and falling. The attacking ships were adapting faster than the defenders could modify their strategies. In 15 minutes, maybe 20 at the outside, the station would be overrun. Sarah closed her eyes and tried to think like the enemy. The devourers absorbed knowledge, consumed technology, learned from every encounter. They were perfect predators, capable of adapting to any threat. But that might also be their weakness. Chief Park, she said suddenly, can you access the Citadel's historical archives? Specifically, records of every trial that's been conducted here. Already on it, Captain. But what are you looking for? Information about failed attempts. Species that tried to join the Council but didn't make it through the trials. Dr. Wright looked confused. Captain, how is that going to help us fight the devourers? Sarah smiled, feeling that familiar sense of pieces falling into place. Because we're not going to fight them. We're going to teach them. The plan she outlined was either brilliant or completely insane, and everyone agreed it was probably both. Using the Citadel's communication arrays, they began broadcasting not just their current defensive strategies, but the complete historical record of every trial ever conducted at the station. Thousands of years of failed attempts, discarded tactics, and abandoned approaches. Captain, Storm Dancer Zell's voice crackled with uncertainty. You are giving them access to millennia of accumulated survival knowledge. This will make them infinitely more dangerous. That's the point, Sarah replied. The devourers absorb information indiscriminately. They can't choose what to learn and what to ignore. We're about to give them the biggest case of information overload in galactic history. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The attacking ships began to slow their advance as they processed the flood of incoming data. Their formation patterns started shifting randomly as different vessels tried to implement conflicting tactical approaches simultaneously. It's working, Rivera reported excitedly. Their coordination is breaking down. They're trying to process contradictory strategies at the same time. But Sarah wasn't finished. Now we give them the real gift. Chief Park, begin broadcasting the complete record of every species that ever failed the Council trials, with special emphasis on their reasons for failure. Captain, Ancient Wisdom Velix said urgently, those records are sealed for good reason. They contain information about fundamental weaknesses, failed evolutionary paths, and extinct survival strategies. Exactly, Sarah replied. We're about to teach the devourers how to fail. The information burst that followed contained tens of thousands of years of accumulated failure. Species that had developed perfect defensive capabilities but lost the ability to adapt. Civilizations that had become so specialized they couldn't survive environmental changes. Evolutionary paths that led to extinction rather than advancement. The attacking ships stopped moving entirely. Their energy patterns became chaotic as they struggled to process information that contradicted itself at every level. Several ships actually began to dissolve as their absorbed knowledge created internal contradictions their systems couldn't resolve. Remarkable, hive mind nexus observed. The Devourer's strength, their ability to absorb and utilize all information, has become their weakness when presented with fundamentally contradictory datasets. The attack was over within minutes. The surviving Devourer ships, their systems overwhelmed by conflicting information, retreated into the depths of space, trailing energy patterns that suggested their internal networks were in complete chaos. As the emergency lights returned to normal and the damage reports began coming in, Ancient Wisdom Velix approached Sarah with an expression of profound respect. "Captain Chen," the ancient being said, "in the span of a single day, you have not only completed our trials in ways we never imagined possible, but you have also saved the Citadel, and quite possibly the entire Council. Your species has demonstrated capabilities that go beyond our traditional understanding of Deathworld survival traits." Sarah looked around the chamber at the assembled representatives, all of whom were watching her with expressions ranging from amazement to something approaching awe. "If I may," she said, "I think you might be misunderstanding what just happened here." "How so?" Thorak rumbled. "You keep talking about this as if humanity did something extraordinary. But everything we accomplished today, from navigating the Void Maze to defeating the Devourers, we did by working with you, learning from you, and building on the knowledge you've accumulated over millennia." Sarah gestured toward her crew and then toward the council members. "The real strength isn't in any individual species or any particular survival trait. It's in the combination of different approaches, different perspectives, different ways of understanding problems." Storm Dancer Zell's plasma form pulsed thoughtfully. "You are suggesting that the Council itself is the ultimate survival adaptation." "I'm suggesting," Sarah replied, "that cooperation and diversity are the most powerful survival tools in the galaxy. The Devourers were defeated not by superior firepower or advanced technology, but by the accumulated wisdom of 50 different species working together." Ancient Wisdom Velix was quiet for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "You speak truth, Captain Chen. And your words remind us of something we had perhaps forgotten in our focus on individual species achievement. Which brings us," Forge Master Crix interjected, "to the question of what happens next. The trials are complete, the emergency is resolved, but we find ourselves in unprecedented circumstances." Valak stepped forward. "Captain Chen, by rights of trial completion and emergency command success, humanity has earned full membership in the Deathworld Council. But your actions today suggest that you might be suited for an even greater responsibility." Sarah felt a sense of foreboding. What kind of responsibility? The Council has operated for millennia under the assumption that survival is primarily about individual species strength. Your leadership today has shown us a different path, one that emphasizes cooperation and collective wisdom over individual capability. The ancient being paused, looking around the chamber at the assembled representatives. "The Council votes to offer humanity not just membership but leadership. Will you accept the position of first speaker, with responsibility for guiding the Council toward this new understanding of survival?" Sarah looked at her crew,